I'm going to tell you everything I've learned in the writing process so far as a newbie author, and this is everything up until the point of writing my book. I spent the last 8 months preparing for my book, plotting and brainstorming, things like that, and it's finally time to start writing my book. But before I did that, I wanted to reflect on what went well and what went poorly, and for the most part poorly, just so I could learn and reflect and do better next time. And in case you're an aspiring author or interested in the writing process, you might be able to learn a few things too. For anyone who's new here, hi, my name is Stephanie, and I am writing a book for the very first time with absolutely no writing experience. And this whole video is going to be based on what I learned because I have no writing experience. So the first lesson I learned is the importance of maximizing my creativity. And by this, I mean two things. I mean learning how I am most creative and when I am most creative. And if I had learned this early on in the process instead of about halfway through, I could have saved myself a lot of time. First, let me touch on when I'm most creative, what I mean by that. And what I mean by that is what time of day. It's kind of a weird thing to even think about, but I noticed after several months that I just was not making progress, and I couldn't figure out for a long time what it was. I knew I was having mental blocks, but I didn't know what was causing it. And at the time, I was mostly doing work in the afternoon on the weekends because that's the only time I had to work on my book. I tended to notice that I was kind of inadvertently coming up with ideas in the middle of the night before I went to bed. And I said, why don't I try working on my book in the evening before I go to bed? And I did that for a few days, and I had a remarkable difference in what I was able to come up with. So I tried writing at different times. After discovering that, I tried writing at different times throughout the day, and I found that a little bit in the morning I was creative, but then late at night was when my brain was most active and coming up with tons of ideas. So it was at that point that I realized, I have creative time zones, if you will. And I was forcing myself for a long time to work in the time zone where I was the least creative. So after learning that, I was able to make a lot more progress on my book. But if I had learned that a lot sooner, I could have saved myself a lot of wasted time. And the second thing I mean is, how am I most creative? What I mean by this is I had to figure out what kinds of activities made me most creative. For a long portion of time in the beginning, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was seeing what other authors were doing, seeing what other people suggested. And a lot of this stuff is Microsoft Word, templates, making all these spreadsheets to track things. And while I don't disagree with those things at all, for me, it wasn't really working. I was developing all these documents and I wasn't going back to them. They weren't helping me. I would just stare at the computer and just be like, this is not getting me anywhere. And I started again to feel really stuck. This was especially prevalent when I was trying to outline my book. I was really struggling because I was trying to do it in Excel and it was not working for me. And that's when I picked up the index card method, which I've talked about in many videos, and I've said in many videos that it's very good for me. And I think that method really worked for me because I'm a very visual and tactile person. So it really helped me to see my whole story in front of me and to move pieces around. And then also just physical writing. I found that physical writing in a notebook is the best way for me to brainstorm and keep up with ideas. And then even putting thoughts on the index card and arranging them, I find the process more enjoyable and immersive for me. And if I had really tried stuff like that earlier, or tried, things that were more visual and things that were more tactile, I think I would have made more progress earlier on. The next lesson I learned is a big one, and I am kicking myself for it every day, and that is writing practice. I neglected writing practice, and I hate to say that because I feel like everyone says, write every day, practice writing every day, and I even saw people saying that, and I still didn't do it. And I think part of it was this mental thing for me because I was working on my book every day, and to me, working on my book equated writing, when in reality, it really didn't. And this was a really hard lesson for me to learn because I have no writing experience. And it wasn't until about a month ago where it kind of dawned on me I was getting really close to the point of writing my book, And I was just like, I've never even really tried writing. And then I started to freak out a little bit. So I made that video about a writing practice, where I started a writing practice. And it was in that writing practice that I had realized I had wasted a huge opportunity, and that is time. I discovered in that 1 week of writing practice so many technical aspects of writing that I needed to improve on, but I had essentially run out of time to fix these problems. I could start working towards fixing them, but the start date of my novel was quickly approaching, and I did not have time to fix everything. If I had started writing practice even before I had started brainstorming ideas for a book, I would be so much more technically competent than I am today. And it really hurts me to know that I hindered myself this much, and it's a regret. Honestly, it's a regret, but I can't go back and change it. I'm taking what I learn as I do my writing practices, and I will definitely learn as I'm writing my book. But I think writing my book even would be a lot easier if I had been practicing writing all these months. This might be a little controversial to some, but the lesson I learned was not to watch writing advice videos and read writing advice articles a ton starting out. I am all for learning. I 100% support learning, and I do think as an author, you should be learning about writing and technique, but I went about it the completely wrong way. So when I first had this idea of writing a book, and then I said to myself, I am going to write this book, I didn't really know where to start because I've never written a book. So what did I do? I essentially info dumped. I started watching every YouTube video I could about writing, videos about character development, videos about plot, videos about world building, and I watched all this stuff, and I tried to get all this advice about writing. And what happened was, because I was a new author, a lot of this advice went in one ear and out the other. I wasn't retaining anything that I was learning. I really wasn't. It was getting me excited, and I would say to myself, oh, that's a really interesting point, or I should remember that. But did I remember it? No. As a new author, I think it's important not to do information overload, because I probably spent about a month just watching videos before I started working on my book. And that was wasted time, honestly, because I don't remember a single thing I watched. It was inspiring, it was informative, but I don't remember it. Over the last few months, I have figured out the best way for me to learn writing, because I don't think it's a good idea to not learn it at all. Absolutely not. But I think the best way for me to learn it was in pieces. So what I found is, as a new author, when I have a problem, which happens a lot because I'm a new author and I don't have writing experience, that's when I start to learn something. So if I come across an issue while I'm plotting, I Google it, I watch a video about it, then I learn how to solve my problem or how to address my problem. And that's when I learn the most, because I have a need for that information. A lot of the information I was getting before, it was useful information, but I didn't need it, so my brain didn't store it. So now that's how I operate. I still watch other videos from time to time just to learn, to keep up that learning aspect of, terminology and story structure and what's going on in the writing space. But overall, I'm not sitting down watching videos for an hour or listening to tons of podcasts on my breaks. It's mostly just searching for answers when I have a problem, and I found it to be really useful. One thing I did not anticipate when I picked up this task was how time-consuming it would be. I have said this before, and I will say it again. I have struggled finding time to work on this book. I am not a full-time author. I have a full-time job, and I do YouTube also, which takes an additional maybe 10 to 15 hours a week. It depends on what I'm doing. And then I have life stuff, hobbies and social engagements and just taking care of my stuff in general. And then I try and squeeze writing a book into that as well. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not, trying to make anyone feel sorry for me. I'm just telling you it's a struggle. I am really having a hard time with the work-life balance, and it's hard because I'm very passionate about writing this book and I want to do it. But when you have all this other stuff going on in your life, it's just so hard to squeeze in the time. And for some reason, I thought that I would be able to work it in. And it's not really that easy. And I think part of it is because A lot of times when I have free time, it's at the end of the day when I'm drained. And it's hard to work on a book when you're drained. So I have to really plan the time that I work on this book accordingly and thoughtfully. And that really limits the amount of time I can work on this book. I think it's been especially prevalent and obvious when you look at how long I've spent doing plotting and brainstorming. This has been going on for, I think, 8 months, which is quite a long time. I think a full-time author, depending on how complex the book is, I don't really see them doing this more than a few months. And I've been at it for 8 months. And I'm not even really, I haven't made that much progress. And I think that just goes to show you how difficult it has been for me to incorporate book time into my life. I could definitely do a better job. I don't deny that. But the fact of the matter is, when you've gone through an entire work day and then you go work out and then you come home and make dinner, do you really have time and energy to work on the book? Some of you might say yes. I sometimes don't, and that's just how I feel. So I'm just really cognizant of what's going on in my life, knowing when to take a step back from everything, not just the book, but YouTube and work and, work I have to do around the house. I try to balance it all so I don't get overwhelmed and stressed out. Unfortunately, I just feel like I'm balancing all these things and I'm at this tipping point, and I haven't quite figured out how to make it work yet. There might need to be a change somewhere in there. I don't know, but it's just been honestly one of the biggest struggles for me. I also wanted to take a minute to talk about imposter syndrome. This is something I have experienced, and I've had imposter syndrome in other areas of life, but not as bad as this. I really haven't. I think it's because in other areas of my life, I think about ballet, for example. I can see beautiful ballerinas dancing on stage, and they're so flexible and beautiful and graceful in their movements. And it doesn't make me feel like an imposter when I dance, because I think I know my physical limitations and I know I will never be as good as them, and it's okay. I've accepted it. The issue I have here is, because I have never written anything before, I don't know how my writing is. I don't know how good my book will be. And so when I come across works by other authors, I find myself going, oh my gosh, I just don't know if I can do that. And then I get really discouraged. What I've learned in all this is that imposter syndrome exists and it needs to be recognized, but to keep fighting through it anyway. Because every author has written their own first book. So you just got to get through that too. But I do want to point out when I feel imposter syndrome in particular. And it's actually not while I'm writing. It is when I'm reading. And that is what happens. Now, most books I will read and I don't give a second thought to writing. I'll just make notes, just as an author, I try to make notes of writing styles or how people tie things together, just like mental notes on how to do things. I experienced this a few months back. I was reading a very good book series and I just was so impressed that I was like, there is no way I can write a book this good. And it's interesting how imposter syndrome works, because logically, I haven't even really started writing a book. So how would I even know that I can't do that? It's just like your mind is automatically trying to shut you down, and I haven't tried it yet. It doesn't really come out while I'm writing. And I think it's because while I'm writing, I tend to notice my mistakes right away. And then I'll just be like, okay, I need to go fix that. Maybe this will change as I start writing a book. Most of the stuff I found to fix is just writing like little short snippets. But we'll see how that changes as I start writing this book. And the last thing I've learned is how much fun I'm having working on this book. I wanted to end on a high note because a lot of the other stuff has been really negative. Like, I messed up here, I did this wrong. And this is something that's right. I'm having the absolute best time of my life doing this. I get so excited thinking about my book. I get so excited telling people I'm writing a book, and just sitting here, I could just sit on the couch and just think about my book and I'm happy. I listen to music and come up with scenes in my head and it gets me excited. This has just been such a thrill for me, and honestly, my life has not been this exciting in quite some time. When I started this project, I didn't even know how it would go. And it was kind of a gamble for me because I knew this was going to take a significant amount of time, And there was a possibility I would hate it. I would hate it 2 months in, 6 months in, a year in, 2 years in. I don't know. I was really nervous when I started this that, like a lot of things that we try as human beings, we think, oh my gosh, this will be so fun. And then we try it and then you're like, I'm never gonna do that again. So I haven't had that experience yet. Hopefully I don't. But I'm having a great time. I look forward to waking up and working on my book. And I'll be honest, I go to sleep thinking about my book and I wake up thinking about my book. I'm just truly enjoying doing this. And it's just a sign for me that I'm doing what I need to be doing, and it just makes me happy. I have really learned a lot in this whole experience of preparing to write my book, and I learned a lot more than I thought. I definitely had a lot of moments where I would say to myself, I wish I knew this earlier, and this would have saved me a lot of time. But that's kind of the whole process of doing something without any experience. You've got to learn the hard way. And boy, have I been learning the hard way. I'm really excited to see how writing my book goes. That's going to be the very next thing I do, the very next video. So make sure you watch that one too. And I will definitely learn more lessons when writing too.